Hi guys, and today I will teach you the basic parts. After watching this video, I can assure you that you will be able to know the basic parts needed for PC building. So let's start off with the very core of your system, which is your CPU or central processing unit. It is the brain of your system. The CPU is probably the single most important component for any computer. For AMD, you'll most likely be looking at Ryzen, or Threadripper if you want high-end. Intel's i-series CPUs are all solid choices, though you'll probably want to consider 8 or 9th gen, i5 or i7 if you're looking for a serious gaming or streaming rig. Next is the motherboard. The motherboard is where you connect all your other components and allows communication between the components. Not all CPUs can fit in a motherboard because there is something you call socket. Examples are LGA 1150, LGA 2011, Socket AM4, FM2, and so on. In my PC build, I have an Intel Core i5 4670, Socket LGA 1150, and my motherboard is ASRock Fatality B85 Killer that has a socket of LGA 1150, so which means they are compatible with each other. Just make sure that your CPU's socket and motherboards are the same and it will be compatible with each other. Next is the RAM. The RAM is the one that stores the files so that your PC doesn't have to go to the drive always. It makes the data that you use regularly easily accessible. There are a lot of choices to choose from, like HyperX, Corsair, Ramax, G-Skill, Samsung, and so on. There really are a lot of choices when it comes to RAM. And did you know RAM have different speeds like 1333 MHz, 1600 MHz, 1866 MHz, 2400 MHz, 2666 MHz, and some are even reaching at the speed of 4 GHz. But the fact that there will be no noticeable difference in terms of performance makes all those speeds useless. Remember, having more RAM is better than having a faster RAM. And to check the compatibility of your RAM to your motherboard is by checking the technology. So there are four types, which are DDR, DDR2, DDR3, and DDR4. As of now, DDR4 is the fastest. If ever you have a DDR2 RAM in your PC, you really need to upgrade. But if you're on DDR3, that would be fine already. And I would recommend that all your RAM would be the same and exact model. For example, you have a G-Skill Trident C, make sure all of your other RAM are like that as well so that you would be free of breeze in terms of RAM. And no matter what you do, if your RAM technology is different from your motherboard, you cannot really install it. Next is your graphics card or your graphics processing unit. This thing will have impact on your gaming experience because this is what makes your game look realistic and allows your PC to do complex graphics, calculations, and increase your frames. Yes, it's true your PC would still run fine without a GPU. That's because of the integrated graphics in your CPU, but you will still get better output when gaming with the graphics card. As of now, NVIDIA's RTX 2080 Ti is the king of the GPUs. You can use low-class GPUs like the RX 480 from AMD or the GTX 1050 Ti from NVIDIA. An RX 570 8GB and an RX 580 4GB is already enough for AAA gaming. Next is the storage. In the storage, you will be given two choices, the SSD and the HDD. The SSD or solid state drive is a smaller but faster than HDD. If you want a large SSD storage, that would be expensive. SSD is just the same with NVMe. It's just that it's placed in the motherboard. That's all. And the HDD is a large storage. There are HDDs that are even 16 terabytes, which is totally huge. So, yeah, those are the only things I would say about HDDs and SSDs. Next is your PSU or your power supply. So the PSU is the main source of electricity of your system, and also don't forget to use an EVR or automatic voltage regulator. Why? Because your system might receive spikes and low electricity, which can raise the risk of you breaking your components, most especially the motherboard. So the AVR maintains the electricity to a stable one to deliver the right amount of electricity for your PC. Let's go back to the PSU. I place a PSU calculator link in the description below so that you would be able to calculate the amount of what you need. If ever you're just gonna use a potato PC, 350 watts is already enough. If you're using a mid gaming system, 400 to 450 watts is enough. But if your rig is a total savage, then I recommend you using 550 to 700 watts. So next is your OS or your operating system. So you choose between Linux and Windows. Of course, most people chose Windows, and I also prefer installing it in an SSD. And make sure to update your OS to the latest version so that you would be able to install apps that require updated OS and fix the bugs that you might encounter. And did you know, updating your OS also improves performance? Not just performance, but some updates change the looks and adds productivity to your Windows or whatever your OS may be. Next is your CPU cooler. So, choosing the right cooler is also important. You can't just buy any cooler out there that you see. Why is that, you ask? First, ask yourself, how long will you use your PC? Next, ask yourself, would you overclock your PC? Then lastly, ask yourself, are you going to use this for gaming? That will give you the answer. How? If you use your PC for a long time, most especially for gaming, it really is recommendable that you use a liquid cooler instead of air cooling. If not, then it's fine to use a CPU heatsink or fan. And next, would you overclock your PC? Well, if yes, it is really recommendable that you use a liquid cooler because liquid coolers have a radiator, and in the radiator is where the water cools off after transferring the heat from the CPU. The CPU gets hot than normal because it is being overclocked. So it just repeats. The water absorbs the heat of your CPU, goes to the radiator, then gets cooled, then just repeats over and over again. And if you're using a CPU fan, make sure you have a good airflow in your case. Next up is the case. So one of the most popular case out there is the NZXT H510 case, which is good. So for you to know if your PC parts would fit in that specific case, most especially your motherboard, is first you must know the form factor of your motherboard. The form factor is the size of your motherboard. Some form factors from the medium one like the ATX form, micro ATX form, or MATX form to the OP large ones like EATX and XLATX form, which are totally large motherboards. So the second step is if you're going to use some radiators or fans, you must know the length and the width. Why? Because your fans and radiators may not fit in the case. If you have a 240 millimeter radiator, then you must put it in the part of the case where there is a free 240 millimeter space in where you can fit in the radiator. Next up is the keyboard and the mouse. There are lots of different styles of awesome keyboards and mouse, those with RGB lightings, awesome design, and comfortable to use. One of the most popular keyboards and mouse are from Logitech. Logitech's mouse and keyboards are all great deal in gaming. But for me, I would recommend more using the HyperX Alloy Elite RGB keyboard, and for the mouse, I would recommend you guys using Corsair Ironclaw RGB. And when it comes to mouse, there is something you call DPI or dots per inch, and this is like the sensitivity of your mouse. The higher your DPI is, the faster your mouse moves. So make sure to pick the right mouse that you are comfortable with. The last but not the least, the monitor. So the monitor is really important because this is where you will see the display or output of your PC, obviously. So there are a lot to choose from. You can go at 60 hertz if you're not using a high-end PC, and 1080p resolution is already enough, trust me. But if you want to go 4K, then go. And if ever you're using a high-end rig, it's better to use 144 hertz so that your gaming experience would be much better. So that's all for today's video, and I hope that you learned something, and I would really appreciate it if you leave a like and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye, see you next time.